Your Honour, it's very nice of you to join us on Test Match Special, and we're not known for our modesty, so can I start off by asking you, how good a cricketer were you when you were a boy? I mean, where did you start your cricket?
Oh, well, I was never very good. I started at my prep school, I suppose, at Cheam, some years ago. And then I had a bit of a break because I went away to Germany for a year to school, and then came back again to Scotland and played there, I suppose, most of the time I was there, until I joined the Navy.
I'm rather cheating, because I found a report of you at Cheam, which said, an energetic all-rounder, highly unsympathetic to stonewalling. Now, that was evidently some report about you at Cheam.
Apparently, yes.
A hard-hitting batsman.
Well, I may have attempted to hit it hard. I don't think I ever succeeded all that often.
And what about Gordonstown? I mean, did they play cricket seriously there? I mean,
well, fairly seriously, yes. But the only problem was when I went there, it was right at the beginning, and we didn't have a ground, or a pitch, basically. We used to go into the public park at Elgin and play there. But it was quite fun. We played all sorts of people round about. We played against the army at Fort George and in Inverness, and we played against various schools up and down Fort Augustus.
I think I've seen some pictures. Did you play in shorts?
No.
No, I've seen a picture.
No, we played hockey in shorts, which was sort of more usual. No, quite conventional as far as cricket was concerned.
And you were captain?
Yes, I suppose for the last term.
Were you a good tactician? I mean,
I have no idea. I can't remember all that much about it.
And was there any cricket in the Navy at all? I mean, when you went to a place like Malta, would you play?
Well, very little, because I joined in, I suppose, in the summer of 1939, yeah. And so it was rather pitchfork straight into the war, and there was really very little opportunity to play cricket during the war. I did play just after the war in Malta, and also I had one ghastly match in Aqaba. It's a place not to play cricket, in my opinion. And I know exactly what it feels like to run out of water in the desert after I'd bowled 3 overs. My tongue swelled up to such a degree I couldn't breathe.
Rather sandy pitch or something? Or...
Yeah, well, it was a matting, I suppose, but it's the thing I'd rather forget about.
I mean, as a boy, were you taken to watch cricket? Did you watch it? Did you have any special heroes?
No, we used to, certainly from Cheam, we went up to Lord's to watch, I can't remember what it was. I suppose it must be one of a test match or something. Oh, yes. I mean, the usual, I suppose, it's awfully difficult to remember names, but I seem to remember the wicketkeeper was called Duckworth, wasn't he?
Oh, yes. The Quack he was called.
Yeah.
Quack, he used to...
But you must have been about the same age, aren't you?
As Duckworth?
No, I meant as... Aren't you about the same age as I am?
I'm regret to say so. I'm about 10 years older than you.
Well, then you'd remember all these people.
I remembered all them. I mean, I wondered if you saw the great Wally Hammond. I mean, because he was the chap who stood out then, or even Bradman.
And Bradman, oh yeah, surely.
Because, I mean, those were the greats of that time.
Yeah.
And what about Prince of Wales and Duke of York and Prince Edward? I mean, did you have them coached, or did they...
No, I didn't have them coached. I rather expected them to play in the ordinary way at school, which they did, the majority of them. But they never went on with it, as it were. I mean, they just played their bit at school and then rather sort of drifted away.
I got 3 sons, and none of them ever played cricket, you know, so it's...
They did play, but I mean, they didn't continue it. Yeah. I had a short period after the war when I played at Windsor. There was a marvellous... do you remember the cartoonist Jackie Broom?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And I remember one glorious occasion when I thought I'd bowl a googly. It came out of the back of my hand, but when it hit the, I mean, when it hit the ground, it did actually go the wrong way. But this time it flew fairly high into the air, and so Jackie Broom saw this coming and ducked, whereupon it hit the wicket full toss. Which he then did a splendid cartoon of this ball arriving. And
Spedigew's dropper, Conan Doyle wrote a thing like that. But again, in my researches, I'm told that you took 1 for 12 against Hampshire. That must have been probably at Highclere, I should think.
Well, we had George. Do you remember George Newman?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Well, he organised a series of sort of charity matches for the National Playing Field Association. The first one was at Bournemouth, actually.
Was it?
Yeah, and it was the first time I'd ever played on a sort of good pitch. At first, I rather enjoyed it. And of course, playing with what amounted to first-class cricketers, either active or retired, They had a marvellous way of organising the game.
They're very cunning, aren't they?
Yeah, and everybody was allowed to get off the mark, but there came a moment when it was considered that they'd had enough. Things got quite serious then.
Yeah, I think you're a bit lucky because Porchy was once going in one of his games, and Ingleman Mackenzie said to Butch White, who's a very fast bowler, give him one. Like you said, give him one to get off the mark. And Butch White thought he meant give him one. He took a 35-yard run and sent him a tremendous beamer, which rather shook Porchy. So
that was a lovely ground. I played there. John Reid was playing in that match, I think, and he made the fastest 50, I think, that anybody's ever made anywhere.
Not off your bowling, I hope.
No, I think he was on my side. I thought I did rather well there. I made 25 in the last innings.
That's right. And I see a picture of you bowling Isingary cap. There's a picture of you bowling.
Not in the cap, I don't think. He was walking out to that was at Arundel.
Yeah, no, I think you were bowling caps. I've always said the only other person was Ronald Coleman in the film as Raffles. You deny?
I swear that I didn't bowl in a cap. But at Arundel, one thing I do remember is I had Tom Graveney was caught at short leg, which of course caused enormous hilarity all round. He was promptly dubbed as my rabbit. You know?
Well, not a bad rabbit to have too.
Well, yeah, for taking 1 wicket, come on.
And what about the great moment in 1950 when you were approached by Martin Boddy and co. to become patron and 12th man? Whose idea, first of all, of the Lord's Taverners? Whose idea was the 12th man? Was it
Martin
yours?
Boddy? I can't remember offhand. I think it was. I said, patron's rather a sort of stuffy title for that sort of thing. I mean, couldn't we have some other title which would perhaps distinguish me from the others? So I said, what about 12th man? I mean, I wasn't prepared to do anything unless it was absolutely necessary.
It was an extraordinary start, wasn't it? These actors getting together and deciding to try and do something for the children.
Well, do things for cricket,
yes.
Yeah. And they were very successful. In the early days, I suggested to them that rather than go to all the business of actually making the donations and finding things to give the money to, that their best bet would be to give it to the National Playing Field Association with certain conditions and put one of their members onto the committee because all the contacts were there. And so they could distribute the money much more cheaply from their point of view. That started them off, and after that they went off on their own.
And now, of course, they produce nearly $1 million a year.
Yes, it doesn't all go into cricket, though.
No, that's right. So they've now gone very much on the minibuses, haven't they, for mentally handicapped and those sort of things, which is very good indeed. And there's some strange events we used to have, didn't we, at the ball? You were there at several of them.
No, I only, I think, attended 2, because I made it a condition that if I was going to go at all, that it wasn't, well, I thought the charity balls were a dead bore, frankly, and I suggested it again, that it was rather, that if they were going to have an evening party, why not do something rather special? And could they not have some sort of do, as it were? And so somebody cooked up this idea of having this cricket match in the Dorchester, where it was ballroom. And it was quite successul. It took an awful lot of organising. And
they had all sorts of things. They had athletic meetings, cricket match.
Yes, each year they did something different.
And they had the rowing.
And the rowing, yes, that's right.
You were definitely there then, because you were the umpire.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you said?
No.
John Snagg always says that you were saying, "Are you ready, Oxford and Cambridge? Taverners, are you sober?" before they started. But they got rigged up these boats and all scientifically.
They took an immense amount of trouble over it. Yes. I think that's what really finally dished it, because nobody could go to quite so much trouble every year.
But it's a rather good way of doing charity, isn't it, to have a sort of camaraderie like this as well. It's because they enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
And then also, in 1949 it was, wasn't it, you became president of MCC. Was this unexpected?
Totally, yes. I think I followed Plum Warner, didn't I?
No,
he
Warner
followed me,
you.
that's right. It was...
Gowrie, Lord Gowrie, was it?
I can't remember, something like that. And he suddenly came along and said, would I succeed him? Well, I didn't know much about it. And, anyway, I took some soundings and people said, yes, go ahead. So I accepted. It was quite interesting because that was the time when the cricket fixtures were growing at a tremendous rate.
Yes.
And there really was quite. It was also, I seem to remember, it was in New Zealand. The New Zealanders came over that
That's
year.
right. Yes, it was. Yes.
But I remember suggesting that it might be an idea to. I could foresee that the demand on first-class cricketers' time would be so great that there would be no room for the amateur. And I suggested then that they ought to divide the cricket up into the county matches should be at weekends so that the amateurs could take part. Midweek should be a professional league with groups of counties. I mean, the professionals from groups would play under different team headings during the week.
Yeah.
That was back in 1949.
Well, it was a bit of advanced thinking anyhow, but it's developed
because
in different ways.
In effect, they put the two together now.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing's become professional. They play both. The same people play both, which is rather... It has squeezed out, in a sense, the gifted amateur. It's a pity.
Well, wasn't it rather awe-inspiring when you had your first meeting there with all these august members?
They were all very jolly lot, really.
They were a jolly lot, weren't they?
I think the great thing with well, in fact, most sports I found that provided you're interested in the sport, age or background makes not the slightest difference.
Yeah.
I found this because I was president of the International Equestrian Federation for years, and I found exactly the same thing. I mean, if you've got an interest in the thing, people forget about everything else.
There's one quote again, I'm very pleased. In your speech, I read it in Tony Lewis's book, I think. You said, "I am the link between the first family and the first sport." Mm-hmm. So can I assume that you think cricket is the first sport still?
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, that's good.
Oh, Lord.
They try and make soccer a national game and all that sort of
Oh, well, it is, but I was president of the FA for a bit too.
Were you?
Yes, so it's all right.
Well, you've done both then.
Yeah.
And I must ask you, because you opened the newsstand the other day, what do you think of the newsstand?
I didn't open it, I launched it.
Well, Lord, launched it that day with the gale. Dreadful.
Well, we've seen it. It's got a great sail on the top.
Yeah, it's very, I like it.
I expected it to go past. You know?
Yeah, it does rather. It reminds me of the tents of the Battle of Agincourt.
That's
the
it,
flag. But do you like it or not? I think it's
No,
rather
it was very good, yeah.
I think it's very fun. And then, unusually, you accepted the president for a second year in 1974. That is a bit unusual. In fact, you're the only one.
Well, are you sure? I don't think I am. There was somebody else.
I don't. Well, so I think we've looked in the thing. They always quote you as being the only one.
Well, I know they do that, but you want to be careful about believing everything you read in the papers. Well, it seemed to be so unusual that it seemed that it was something that would be quite amusing to have in the record books. Yeah. But actually, I discovered that there was a much more sinister reason for it. Oh. And that was the committee wanted to put up the subscriptions. And so I walked into the annual general meeting to preside, to be given the agenda, which said, propose the increase in subscriptions. I suddenly realized why I'd been asked back again.
No one would dare boo you.
Well, they did.
Did they? That's very awkward. Anything about the role of MCC today? Do you just see it now as a club which has lost its sort of...
No, I don't think it's lost anything. I think you've got to have a sort of development. I mean, the whole scene has changed. Yeah. I think the idea that a club can be both the sort of central club in England anyway, and also the governing body for the sport worldwide or involved in that is really very unreasonable. I don't think anybody should. I think that the club and the MCC has got exactly the same responsibilities as it always had. But inevitably, you've got to share the responsibility for test matches and international cricket with a wider body. Yes. And I think that's a normal development.
Yes, I think the members make an awful lot of fuss about it, aren't they?
Yes, I think, you know, it's marvellous to say, oh, this is the way it always used to be. But the thing is that the whole picture of picture of cricket is different. I mean, it isn't played the way it was 40 years. I mean, it's not organised the way. Yeah. There's so much more of it, and there's so much more international. There's a World Cup. There are all these knockout tournaments and every other sort of thing, which never existed before.
Yeah. What about the national playing field, sir? You're still very much involved, the president of that. I mean, what is the main need for that now? You've done so much for the sport.
Well, it's very difficult. We ran into difficulties over the charity law because the MTFA is a charity, and of course originally it helped out village clubs and all sorts of anybody who wanted to play cricket. Mm-hmm. But it turned out that you're not allowed, a charity is not allowed to give to an organisation that is not itself a charity. Yeah. And of course, for years it was accepted that a non-profit club, I mean a sort of social thing that was certainly not making any money, was at all intents and purposes a charity. But then we had to stop that. So it really became quite a problem. We give a lot of advice on depends who asks for it, of course, whether they're charged. But the main emphasis now is on sort of children's playgrounds, which of
A
course,
lot of adventure playgrounds, aren't there? Which is
well,
very
but
good.
I mean many other, the whole range of children's play, because funnily enough, it doesn't come under the Sports Council. They don't take any interest in, I mean, when they don't take any interest, they're not required to.
Yeah.
And there is really no one who coordinates the whole spectrum of children's play. And actually, the situation in that area is a bit confused at the moment, but there's plenty for the MPFA to do.
I mean, are you in favour, basically, of things like the national playing fields being responsible as opposed to government doing it? I mean,
well, I think the government finds it very difficult to do it because central government can't really administer this thing on a national basis. It's got to be local authority. And local authorities do, in fact, of course, help a very great deal, but they vary very much from one place to another. And of course, with the provision of playing fields and play space, it's also, you've got to get at the planning authorities, the new towns people, the development corporations, actually to make provision for play space and playing fields. We found that in the days of the new towns, for instance, the greatest difficulty in persuading them to leave room for playing fields.
And they're more and more being encroached on, aren't they? Which is what it says.
Well, but that's another difficulty, see, with the price of land, and of course a lot of companies had their own playing fields, and they wanted to expand, so they expanded onto their playing fields. One of the things that we tried very hard to do was to get employers in a town to gang together and provide playing fields, in a sense, on a community basis for everybody, rather than each one have its own field. Now, of course, the difficulty is that even local authorities are beginning to get rid of playing fields because they want to earn some money by selling. And it makes it very difficult for schools and for clubs and for... playing fields generally has had a pretty rough time the last few years.
How important, I mean, I think I know the answer, do you regard team games and competitive games? I mean, do you regard that as important?
Well, I do, yes, because I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for individual sports. They give you a great kick if you win and that sort of thing. But I think the important thing about team games is that it's really a part of social education. And it's a sort of education you don't get anywhere else. I mean, you learn, because it's fun, you learn to cooperate, you learn to sublimate your personality into the team. You have to learn to win and to lose. And I think it's very good for people. And they learn how to get on in society, in a sense, very easily through games, which is very difficult to learn in any other way. You can't teach people how to do it.
There are people who say, you shouldn't be too competitive these days.
Well, I don't think team games are, in a sense, not too competitive. It's true that if you get into the professional end, of course they become competitive because you've got the inducement of earning money. But most amateur games are not as bad as that. And certainly amateur sport generally is people go and enjoy themselves. I mean, I go in for this carriage driving now, and it's great fun. It's a sort of great family, somebody wins one weekend, some wins another. There isn't that sort of terrible pressure. Although in some classes there are, particularly when there's something like a world championship coming off, and when you're sponsored, that's when the pressure's on, because then you want to do well for your sponsor. Then you say, well, if I can get into the world championship, then I can, do even better for the sponsor. And then you think, well, if there's a shortcut, I'll take it. And so the pressure goes on only in a certain area. But I wouldn't have thought that normal competition is bad for people at all.
Is it as dangerous as it looks? I mean,
What, carriage driving?
Yes. I mean, have you been pulled off the box and things?
No. I mean, everybody's. No, I mean, everybody's. Well, everybody. Most people have turned over at some stage or another. But
it sound very casual.
But no, it's not as bad as that.
It looks terrifying. Well, in contrast then to the team thing, you have your awards, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which is very much individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the object of that is to...
but it is in 4 sections anyway.
Yeah.
And there's the service section, which is individual, although you can do that with a group. And that's not, or you can do it through an organization. There's a skills section, which you can either do in a group, let's say in amateur theatricals or something of that sort. But those two you can do individually, obviously. There's a physical recreation section, which you can do individually or through team games.
You can do it through teams.
Oh, yes,
I didn't know
absolutely,
that,
yes.
yes.
Oh, Lord, yes. And then there's the expedition section where you have to go in a group of 4, at least. So it's not as if it was you were completely cut off. And then you for Gold Award, one of the conditions is you have to go away for a residential course for a weekend or thereabouts. And of course, for many young people, that's the first time they've ever been away from home. And then they have to mix with other people of their own age. So it's not exactly a team thing, but at least it's a community activity.
What made you start it? Just for this very purpose,
Well,
to
it's
get
rather
people?
long-winded. I mean, it's a rather long story,
Yeah.
but we had a thing rather like this. It was started by my headmaster at Gordonson, Kurt Hahn. And it was slightly like what the present award scheme is. But then he came to me after the war in about 1950, something or other, 4 or something, and said, "My boy, I want you to start an award scheme."
He called
And
you
I
my boy?
Actually, and I said, "Yes, sir," sort of thing. I said, "Well, you get a group together, and if they agree, I'll come and chair it." And he did, and he got John Hunt, who was a member of the committee, who was rather taken with the idea and offered to be the first director. But the principle of the exercise really was to provide an introduction to the sort of activities that adults found interesting and rewarding, which was in most cases not included in the ordinary formal education. This was all the sort of side things which took place at boarding schools, but very often don't take place in any other schools.
The encouraging thing must be, you have tremendous demand for people taking part, don't you?
Yeah, well, anybody can take part.
Yes.
I mean, it's now running in 40-odd countries, I think.
That's great. Nice success story. Can we just come back to cricket in this bicentenary year? Is there anything about modern cricket you'd like to see changed? Anything you don't like when you watch it on the telly? Or think you say, gosh, why they do that? Or is there anything?
No, I don't think so. I only wish to God that sometimes some of their trousers fitted a bit better.
Well, they've all changed a bit. It's a very close fit sometimes.
Yeah.
But what about the embracing after? We're getting a bit better now in the English team, I think, after someone's taken a catch.
Yes, it's quite funny, isn't it? I mean, in the old days, it was considered, no matter how excited you were, you had to sort of play it down and pretend nothing had happened. Now you go to the absolutely opposite extreme. I mean, something quite normal, and everybody gets in a frightful state of excitement.
Rugby players don't. If you score a brilliant try, they hardly pay any attention to it.
That's right.
But in cricket...
But that used to be the standard way of doing it, didn't it?
Yes.
You took a catch, you didn't even take your hat off. I mean, you certainly didn't throw the ball in the air.
No. Well, but nowadays, of course, it must be so painful.
I don't think these things go in fashions. It'll change one way or the other.
Well, so thank you very much for talking to us, and as I'm going to maintain that you're the only chap who's been president twice of MCC.
Don't close the book yet. It may be a third time.
Well, let's hope there is, sir, and thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
In another 25 years' time.
Thank you so much.